When I first started as an ER nurse, besides freezing up at times, I struggled to know what concise questions I needed to ask. I struggled keeping my assessments short and sweet. I struggled getting all the information and physical findings I needed. So, for those new ER nurses that are like me when I was new, I created this video to help put everything in one place. So, in this cardiac assessment video, you're going to learn how to look for conditions that are deadly, what questions you need to ask, how to keep your assessments concise, what to look for on an initial impression, and even how to go about evaluating critical patients requiring immediate stabilization. Now, thank you for watching, and let's get started. Why is it important that we are good with our assessments? Well, essentially, we're trying to rule out or look for diseases that are deadly, right? So differentiating patients who are sick versus not sick. Therefore, your assessment skills are very important because you're busy, you have many things to do, and you need to figure out who deserves your time the most, aka prioritization, right? So the goal is to be quick and concise. You should eventually get to the point where you are in and out of a room in 5 minutes. But of course, in this time, you will be finding out if your patient is sick. And if they are sick, you will be devoting more time today. So one thing that I do want to note is that the cardiac and respiratory assessment go hand in hand, but today we're just going to focus on the cardiac aspect of it, and then on the next video we're going to focus on the respiratory aspect of it and kind of tie it together. So what is the main question that we are trying to answer with the cardiac assessment? The answer lies with what is the role of the heart, right? So here, with the cardiac assessment, we are trying to figure out if there's adequate perfusion happening for the body. The first part of the cardiac assessment is the visual assessment, otherwise known as the first or initial impression. I like to call it the visual vital signs. It just sounds a little more fun for me. So here, we simply look at the patient and determine if they look sick. Do they look sick, right? So the things that we need to be looking out for and keeping in mind are like things like mottled skin, diaphoresis, do they look pale, do they look altered? And things like, are they slouching in a weird position? Do they seem like they're guarding? And then some obvious things like, is EMS already bagging them when they're walking through those doors, right? One thing that you should keep in mind is that EMS will give you some type of report, right? It can be very thorough or very limited. It can perhaps guide you in the right direction. However, as I mentioned, what if the report is limited? It's going to be up to you to figure out what is going on with the patient. So as we've discussed in prior videos, while the patient is being connected onto the monitor where you're going to get your vital signs like a blood pressure, a heart rate, and SpO2, you're going to have to multitask. You may be doing all of this by yourself or with the help of others, but don't let it scare you. Know that the more you do it, the better and faster you'll be. Just keep in mind that nothing good in life comes easy. So the more you do this, the better you'll get. So simple. If the patient is awake, it's great, right? We're gonna gather our information from them. So sometimes I personally find that just by simply asking the patient, what brings you to the ER today, or how can we help, most patients are going to provide all the information that we need. But there are some times when we may have to guide the patient towards the important things. So we're going to begin by asking the A&O questions, the alert and oriented questions like, what is your name? What year is it? Where are you? And again, what brought you to the hospital? These essentially tell you that the patient is having adequate perfusion to the brain at this moment in time and is able to think and recall. So next, you'll want to ask about the specifics. For example, since we're doing a cardiac assessment, we're going to ask, what does your chest hurt? Or we'll also want to ask, do you feel any pressure or any palpitation? Since in the past, I've found that some patients don't consider pressure in their chest to be pain. So you have to ask specifically about pressure. And then also you may have to specifically ask about palpitations, as some patients may not bring it up even if they are having it. Instead of palpitations, you can say something like, do you feel like your heart is racing? Because some patients may not know what palpitation is. So further questions you need to ask is, when did your chest pain start, right? What were you doing when it started? Were you up and about doing activities, or were you resting, or were you eating, or did the pain wake you up from your sleep? and then ask, where is your pain exactly? Does it radiate anywhere? Does it go to your shoulders, perhaps to your arms? It's to the left side or the right side? Does the chest pain go all the way to your back? Does it travel up to the neck or the jaw? And then things like, what makes it worse? Does activity make it worse? What makes it better? Does resting make it better? And then you'll want to ask if the pain is consistent at all times, and if it does come and go. So which one, is it consistent or does it come and go? And then another thing that you should ask, which is sometimes very helpful, is if this pain has happened in the past before, and how did it go away? And perhaps if they did seek medical help, what were they told? Since if this pain is very similar to the previous one and they seek medical help, what were they told? And that information can help us, can guide us as to what we're dealing with and looking for. Next, you should go into some of the associated symptoms like dizziness. Are they feeling dizzy? Are they feeling short of breath? Are they feeling nauseous? Have they vomited at all? Are they feeling increasingly weak? And all of these sort of point to perhaps a cardiac etiology, and that's why they're associated symptoms. Next, we should go into the medical problems and the medications that they currently take. For example, ask about are they on blood thinners? Are they taking any blood pressure medications on a regular basis? Do they take aspirin on a daily basis? Do they have a history of having prior heart attacks? So essentially, the more risk factors that the patient has, the greater likelihood that something serious is happening, right? And if they've had previous heart attacks, and you know that they're likely to have another one again, right? And then another important thing to keep at the back of your mind is that diabetic patients and females can sometimes present with non-specific symptoms or discomforts when they are having a heart attack, right? So in these patients, you should consider at least doing an EKG, right? So the next thing you should be asking about is, what about drug use? Drugs like cocaine and meth can cause chest pain from how hard they're making the heart work, right? So it's important to ask. Doesn't matter what your patient, you're not judging anybody by how they look. You ask anybody that's having chest pain, hey, do you do any drugs? Because if they do, the treatment for this chest pain can differ, right? Right. So next, we're going to be going in deeper into the cardiac assessment. Okay, so now let's go into assessing a patient who perhaps can't speak back to us, whether it is because they are comatose, altered, or in such severe distress that speaking is clearly out of the picture. Once you've ruled out all the basic fundamental ER things like ensuring symptoms aren't related to hypoglycemia and perhaps an opioid overdose, you'll go into the specifics of a cardiac assessment. So once again, we're going to start with our initial impression. How sick does the patient look? And while the patient is being connected onto the monitor, you're going to assess their skin color, noting important things like cyanosis, paleness, diaphoresis, and mottled skin. You'll look for obvious signs of edema, noting if it is bilateral or unilateral, as bilateral tends to be a heart issue, while unilateral can be a venous issue like a DVT, right? So take a quick look also at their JVD, also known as the jugular venous distension, as it is a poor man's way of assessing CVP or the patient if the patient is in fluid overload. Another thing that we're going to go into is assessing CAB refill in all extremities, and more importantly, look at their pulses and assess their pulses. One thing that you should keep in the back of your mind is that a BP of around 70 is needed for a carotid and femoral pulse, right? So if you can feel it when you're palpating it, then you know the patient's blood pressure is at least 70 or more. The radial pulse needs approximately a blood pressure and SBP of 80, and then the pedal pulses need an SBP of 100. So if you can feel a radial pulse, you know that the patient's blood pressure is at least 80 or above. This is useful if the patient is not yet on the cardiac monitor. Once your patient is on the monitor, you can get important information like blood pressure, heart rate, SpO2, and a cardiac rhythm. I always like to repeat my patient's blood pressure right off the bat, even if the first one is great, specifically if the patient looks sick. There's been plenty of times when the first blood pressure was great, but someone repeats it for whatever reason and it comes back shitty over shitty. So if the patient is tacky with the low blood pressure, you know that there's some type of shock occurring, and the heart rate is because the body is trying to compensate. So having the rhythm on the monitor is also helpful because you can quickly see if your patient is in SVT or AFib RVR or even in VTAC, right? So this brings me to another very important point, which is that you need to obtain an ECG within 15 minutes of patient arrival, or it should at least be among the top things to do on your to-do list, because an ECG can show an MI, it can show arrhythmias clearly, and it can even give clues as to if a patient is having a pulmonary embolism. Thankfully though, this is one of the things that you can delegate to somebody else if you have the help. So as always, don't forget to listen. Keep it simple. Are the heart sounds loud and clear? Are they distant? Are they irregular? Do you hear any extra heart sounds like S3, S4, or any murmurs? And then further assessments that can be performed at the bedside include a bedside echocardiogram, which is usually going to be performed by your ER provider. And it can show things like ejection fraction, which is the percentage of blood that leaves the left ventricle. It can also show the right ventricle size, which if it's bigger and dilated, it can be a telltale sign that something is going on in the lungs. The IVC, or the inferior vena cava, will show signs of fluid deficits when the examiner compresses it and it collapses. And it can show other things like a pericardial effusion, and then among other stuff, right? And as far as history, if the patient cannot provide it, you'll do the best you can, but you'll obtain it from family, from friends, from EMS, or do a chart review if the patient has been at your facility. And by the way, if you're finding this helpful and want to save time and energy with mastering the chaos of the ER, check out our book and course. They are packed with everything you need, including emergency essentials, quizzes, scenarios, charting tips, and additional just overall practical tips to help you feel confident and prepared in the ER. You'll find the links in the pinned comment and description below. Here, I just wanted to name some of the deadly things that we are going to be watching out for, right? So these include things like the everything ACS related, pericardial effusions, a thoracic aortic aneurysm, pulmonary embolisms, tension pneumos, essentially everything that's included in ACLS, which is, SVT, bradycardia, blogs, VFib, VTAC, all of those. We're going to be watching out for CHF exacerbations, hypertensive crisis, and there's much more still, but these are some of the basic ones that we need to keep an eye out for. So after your assessment, you're going to know how sick your patient is, and if needed, you're going to devote as much time as possible to stabilizing them and performing the workup after the assessment to ensure we find out what is going on and that we begin to treat it. So some final thoughts though is that I am going to be making more future videos, but that's going to take time, right? So you need to be studying and searching things up at home. You need to familiarize yourself with the basics. So of course, the more you see and experience, the better, but that's not the excuse. That's not an excuse for not going the extra mile, because the last thing you want is to be at work, being in the room, having your patient, and not knowing what is going on, right? So at least if you take the time to understand the basics, you'll be better off, right? So on another note, let's learn from others, right? Listen to the questions that they ask and how they perform their assessments, and ask if you can't think of the reason for why they did something or how they did something, right? Don't be shy, because again, the more you know and experience, the better you are going to be as a nurse, and the more capable you'll be of taking care of your patients. So guys, thank you for listening to the video, and as always, teamwork makes the dream work, guys. Teamwork makes the dream work.